Excuse me, you feeling cold?
So listen to this. Cole Palmer has been messing with your heads. Back in March, when this guy randomly ran off the stadium in the middle of the crowd, he already had fans strolling him, claiming that he was running more outside the pitch than he ran inside it, saying they hoped he was running off to Saudi Arabia. The court of public opinion was ready to stamp him with the harshest label in the sport. Cole Palmer was finished. Or at least, that's what he wanted us to believe. Just a few months later, Chelsea were stepping up to the measly Conference League final with their whole reputation at stake, and their star player had just 3 assists over his previous 30 matches. It was embarrassing. They were within inches of watching Anthony, the GOAT himself, put them out of their misery. Except then, Palmer picked precisely that moment to get 2 assists, something he hadn't done in 276 days, turning the game around in the space of 5 minutes. And, of course, then, his next target was the Club World Cup. Going 6 months, 28 matches without an open play goal right up till that tournament, before pulling that same old trick and catching PSG so off guard with one of the greatest final performances of all time that they literally threw a tantrum at the end of the game, which surely can only mean one thing. There's got to be some conspiracy theory. This guy has got to be playing tricks on us. Or maybe, just maybe, a lot of these so-called fans ran to a lot of conclusions way too fast. I mean, listen very carefully. Over these supposed terrible months, no player in Europe has created more goal-scoring chances than Palmer. In fact, I'll go a step further. He has scored just 3 fewer open-play goals and made 3 fewer assists on this supposedly tragic league campaign than he did last season, when he was literally being named the most exciting young player on the planet. People have jumped on this bandwagon so fast they forgot the beginning of this season before it even ended. So I guess, let me remind you, it all began with Maresca. From the moment he took over, there were debates brewing over whether or not Palmer and him would be a good match. Some were quick to point out that they already knew each other, that Maresca had coached Palmer in the Man City Academy, that they even won several titles together, while others pointed out that Maresca was also the assistant coach at City, that they were running the risk that just as Pep's obsession with his tactics had pretty much ruined the first years of Palmer's career, maybe the tactics of his very own assistant coach could destroy Palmer altogether. There was obviously a lot of reason to be worried, but then, well, nothing really seemed to have changed. Only 2 games into the league season, Palmer opened his tally right before halftime with the Premier League's goal of the month, making himself the first player ever to win that award 2 months in a row. And still, then, he went into the locker room, came back, and hit 3 assists in the space of 14 minutes. Had Haaland not scored 2 hat-tricks that month, the Player of the Month award would certainly have gone to Palmer as well, but that just wasn't a problem for him. On the first game of September, he completely handed Nicholas Jackson a free goal. By the third, he banged in one himself. And 7 days later, as the month was about to end, he found Chelsea going behind against Brighton and quickly leveled the match. 6 minutes later, he converted a penalty to put them in front. And just 3 minutes after that, he hit a free kick right into the top corner, making it a hat-trick within 9 minutes. The 5th fastest in Premier League history. Although 5th place just wasn't enough, so once Brighton scored a second to inch closer to Chelsea, he showed up again with a near-post finish, making that 4 goals before half-time, something which had never happened in Premier League history. It was simply the greatest half-time performance England had ever seen, and still, somehow, underrated, because what people forget, and as Maresca himself said, he scored 4, but he could have scored 2 or 3 more. Because even before that first goal, not only had he hit the post already, he had also been denied a goal by VAR. He was so dangerous every time he touched the ball that it got to the point where he stepped up for a corner and a commentator jokingly asked, "Do you think he could score from there?" His only mistake all game was a wasted one-on-one, and even then, all the commentator could do was say that, well, he is human after all. Though I'd give that some second thought after taking a look at his heat map, because this guy did all of this while playing so deep you could almost mistake him for a right back. And that's the thing, his main role in that game wasn't even supposed to be scoring goals, it was creating them. Still, in that first half he had put in an incredible first touch pass to Maresca, who ended up hitting the post. He also put in virtually the same pass to Jackson in the second half, and he missed a literal open goal. I can't even tell you how many chances Jackson wasted. The fact Palmer came out of that game with no assists was already a sign of what would happen later in the season, where the likes of Salah would end it as the #1 player with the most progressive passes received from his teammates in the whole league, while Palmer, he would be 0.05 progressive passes per 90 away from being the one forward among his teammates who received them the least. But I'll get to that in a minute. After that match, not only did Palmer have Maresca calling him the best player in the league, but the league itself seemed to somewhat agree, as they'd finally hand him the Player of the Month award, and only days later, after assisting Chelsea's equalizer against Forest, he had, through online vote, been named the England national team's Player of the Year, finally being vindicated after Southgate benched him throughout the whole Euros, only for him to still make it as their most decisive player with the few minutes he had been given. Regardless, right after this he came up again, scoring the winner against Newcastle just days later, and though he went without a single goal or assist in November, he only played 3 matches, and once that month was over, he quickly got an assist and smacked in a screamer against Aston Villa that not only left the keeper glued to the ground, but meant he had hit 30 Premier League goals for Chelsea in just 46 matches, second only to Hasselbank at 41, though even he had 7 fewer assists than Palmer over that time. In fact, take all-time greats like Hazard and Drogba, and even they needed 88 and 67 matches respectively to get to 30 goals. Even in Hazard's best streak throughout his entire time at the club, he needed 76, and before you bring up assists, he had only 2 more than Palmer. Yeah, and let's not even mention the absolute pressing machine that Palmer was in that game. At one point he won the ball back from Tillmans for what seemed like the 100th time, and Emi Martinez got so scared he gave away a free kick a meter from the goal line. Still, this wasn't the end, not yet, because the next game he scored another, tying Hasselbank yet again, this time for the record for most goals scored for Chelsea in a calendar year, meaning that when 4 days later he found himself at the penalty spot with Chelsea trailing 2-1 behind Tottenham, needing a win to hold on to their second place, well, he banged it in, breaking the record. And before you go on saying it's just a penalty, well, actually that penalty allowed him to match Yaya Touré's league record for the most penalties converted without ever missing, and yet he wasn't done. Then he stepped up to the penalty spot again, knowing he could now outright break that record as well as get his team the win they so desperately needed, and as only he could, Palmer hit the Panenka, sending Chelsea within 3 points off the top as Liverpool drew to Fulham, leading Paul Merson to claim in the post-match analysis that his performances this season have been more impressive than in his debut season. But just as the cult of Cole Palmer hit all-time highs, then his absurd goal against Fulham wasn't enough to avoid defeat. The one against Palace only helped him to a draw, and his dummy against Bournemouth went the same way, so suddenly he had gone 4 matches without a win. Chelsea were down to 5th, and to make things worse, out of nowhere, that would be his last open play goal for 6 months. Sure, just a couple matches later, his deflected cross ended up in the back of the net, and the match after that, he forced another own goal. But that game, they still got knocked out of the FA Cup regardless to no other than Brighton, and if the contrast between that game and the other one 5 months earlier wasn't clear, then 6 days later they played Brighton a third time for the actual reverse fixture of Palmer's 4-goal haul, and this time they were the ones getting demolished 4-0. So when Marco Asensio dunked on them a week later, Chelsea were up to 12 matches with only 3 wins, 2 points away from losing out on Europe altogether, and if already then there were talks about what was going on with Cole Palmer, they had no idea how much worse it would get, because in March, Chelsea would begin turning their form around, and yet, on the first league game of the month, everyone watched almost in shock as Palmer stepped up for a penalty and missed for the first time ever. After the match, Maresca tried to justify it with the fact Palmer wasn't supposed to play that game, claiming he had been out for 2 days with a fever and, hilariously, some diarrhea, which did explain why he ran off into the locker room the moment he got subbed off. But, well, then, after a year and a half where he had only missed 1 game, ironically, because of a cold, right then, he also got his first injury, getting sidelined for an estimated 3 weeks, putting him in risk of missing the match against Spurs just as Chelsea needed to drop next to no points at all in order to make the UCL spots, finally sending the media into a frenzy. Suddenly, there were people claiming that the previous season had been a false image built on penalty after penalty and that, even in this one, he had relied only on his 2 phenomenal performances against Wolves and Brighton to pad his numbers. They claimed that Cole Palmer had truly gone cold. Some pundits guessed that he was fatigued, overworking and stressing himself under the weight of expectation. After all, this was the guy who, according to Maresca, insisted on playing despite being sick because he himself had to lead Chelsea to the Champions League. But it wasn't all about the weight on his shoulders. Others said that defenders had simply figured him out, which did make some sense as he was fouled about twice as much this season than in the previous one. A lot of fans also blamed his teammates, especially Nicholas Jackson, which, again, also made some sense since, as I said, Palmer topped the charts across Europe for chances created between December and February, yet not a single one had been converted into a goal, with Jackson, of course, wasting 7 out of the 32 he created, and that type of thinking was also what led a good chunk of the more die-hard fans to insist it was all just an unlucky streak, since if you set aside those infamous penalties, he had been scoring at a similar rate to last season and generating about the same amount of expected assists. Though, in my opinion, the most credible points were the ones made against Maresca's playstyle, slower, more methodical and possession-based, pretty much putting Palmer on a leash. By the Tottenham game, not only did Palmer make it back in time, he assisted the winner with a perfect cross, but then they got defeated by Legia Warszawa, and when asked about Palmer, Maresca insisted it's all mental, not tactical. Since the beginning of the season, it's been the same manager, the same style of football, the same club, nothing changed. We always try to set up Palmer, go back game by game, and he had at least 1 or 2 chances in every one. He is just missing the goal, nothing more than that. However, I beg to differ. Obviously, a manager isn't just plug and play. The team didn't fully transition from Pochettino's tactics to Maresca's the moment he sat on the bench, so it would make sense that Palmer would progressively get worse over the season if the new tactics weren't to fit him. And look at that, a graph of expected goals from fast breaks over time, just what Palmer loves. And of course, towards the end of Pochettino's season they hit a peak, and that was also the peak of Palmer's season. However, once Maresca arrived, they started on a high and then slowly went down as they transitioned into a new style and precisely as Palmer's performances worsened. And on top of all, Maresca cannot deny this was up to his decisions. Back when Chelsea were playing direct transitional football, he was the one who was unhappy, claiming they were being dragged into basketball matches. You could often see him applauding when his players slowed down the tempo of games, even outright admitted he wanted them to learn how to win ugly, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it was a compromise he knew would cut Palmer short. Still, the question remains, what changed at the end of the season? Well, we got the first signs against Liverpool. Not only did Palmer finally score, even if through a penalty, but I think this was his first real click into Maresca's system. What makes a good player great is the ability to play in any system he is put in, and as Palmer himself said, I wasn't too bothered. I knew it was going to come. Now, he wasn't relying on fast breaks, he was taking on that possession-based football and controlling the tempo, now deliberately choosing when to go full tilt rather than following the flow of the match. And that allowed him to, aside from that penalty, also hit the post and create 4 chances, being involved in all 3 goals, earning them a seriously important 3 points that would secure them that Champions League spot they were so desperate for. And in the end, even among all the chaos, he still earned the PFA Player of the Year nomination no matter what. Still, if that was the first click, that Conference League final when the stakes were at their highest just as he likes it, was his coming-of-age moment. Palmer was all over that game. He had gone from a player that exploited the other team's weakest moments in counterattacks at breakneck speed to one who could also slowly build up tension, danger, and the result was a Man of the Match award and an ovation from the fans as he became the first player since Marcelo to assist 2 goals in an European final. After that, the Club World Cup was almost easy pickings. In a tournament that once again had far higher stakes for Chelsea, as they had only landed there thanks to their 2021 UCL title, even though ever since then, they had not just changed coaches 4 times but changed ownership altogether, with virtually no remaining players from that era still on the team. So, of course, Palmer thrived. An assist in the last 16 proved he was truly back in business, and then that great touch in the quarters set him up for the goal that not only allowed him to finally properly break his dry streak, but also to pretty much win the game for his team. So once he started the semis as a center mid, showing just how confident Maresca had become on his ability to take charge of the whole system, well, maybe PSG should have known better, yet they didn't. Instead, Maresca opened the way up for those fast breaks again, and maybe for the first time ever, PSG were hit with both versions of Palmer at once. Whenever they were cautious and sat back, it could grind his way towards danger. Whenever they got confident and went higher up the pitch, it punished them instantly, and the result were 2 goals and an assist, the Man of the Match award, and a demolition of the supposed best team on the planet to make himself a world champion and lit up the Empire State Building in blue. So I guess it's time to start worrying about Chelsea again.